since I've moved here to Sydney, Australia. For reference, if you haven't seen my videos before, I used to live in Portland, Oregon. But I've watched movies in theaters in Portland, Seattle, Las Vegas, Phoenix. I'm sure more places than that. So I've been to theaters all over the place, and I have to say now, 3 or 4 experiences here in Australia, the theater going experience is much nicer. People are quieter. Throughout the 3 showings, I've yet to have a single person sitting there on their phone, whether it's texting or whatever, like scrolling. I haven't had people talking loudly to the people next to them. It's all been people very quiet and respectful. And in the States, I'd feel like maybe every other time I'd have somebody who's just extremely obnoxious. Now, I want to give the caveat that part of me wonders if this is like, because of the rise of streaming, TikTok, YouTube, other entertainment things, that people are going to the movie theater less, like, casually. So the only people that are still going to the movie theater are people who really love movies and really want to be at the theater having that experience. That could very well play a factor. I'm not sure. But just overall, it's been really nice. And the day I was at an event cinema in Parramatta. It was the only cinema near me showing the film, and I had a really positive experience. Okay, now we're going to talk about the movie itself, and if you've never seen any of my movie reviews before, I do not avoid spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want a spoiler-free review, this is not the place for that. I don't have a structure to this review. It's just gonna be me talking about whatever comes to mind. So I'm just gonna go. So from here on out, there will be potential spoilers. So I have talked about before how much I love Robert Eggers' work. The Lighthouse is one of my 10 favorite movies of all time. It's in my top 10. I really liked The Witch, his first major release. And The Northman was okay. I think it's the weakest of all of his films, even including this one. But for me, Nosferatu, while I did really like this movie, I don't think it's better than The Lighthouse. And I don't think it's better than The Witch. Now this is of course a retelling of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel. But then, this, from what I understand the history to be, Nosferatu, the original 1920s picture, was done by a German filmmaker, and they basically took the story of Dracula, changed the location to Germany, changed the character names around, but for all intents and purposes it was the same story, and I believe Bram Stoker or their estate sued them for it. I'm not 100% sure about all that. That's just, I believe that's what happened. And, yeah. But, so this film takes on a lot of that German, influence. Obviously, it's set in Germany. But even though it's set in Germany, all the characters are speaking English, save for Count Orlok, most of the time. He has a few bits of speaking English. I didn't really like it when he spoke English. There are parts of this movie where he would speak his native tongue, which I'm gonna quickly Google what that was. Let's see. What language was he speaking? Inspired by Orlok being an ancient Romanian count, Eggers made the decision to have him speak the Dacian language, an extinct language historically spoken in Dacia in the film. Okay, so he's speaking Dacian. Now in those segments where he was speaking that language, I quite liked the voice and the everything, but when Orlok was speaking English, I thought it was a little bit weaker. He really rolled into the R's, and he carried his like very strongly. It almost felt a little comical. And that was kind of the only aspect of the Orlok performance I disliked. Other than that, Bill Skarsgård did a fantastic job in that character. Like, you wouldn't even realize that's Bill Skarsgård if you didn't know. It was so crazy. The makeup and everything was amazing, the performance. But as I was saying, it's set in Germany, but all the characters are speaking English. I wish that, because when Orlok is communicating with Lily Rose Depp's character, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Ellen, when he's communicating with her, he's speaking in Dacian, but she can understand and she's responding in English. I wish he had done similar with Nicholas Holt's character, Thomas. But seeing the period, Eggers has been going for these period pieces, like historical horror almost, and of course he has the heavy theological themes as well, which for me personally, because of my interest in theology, I really enjoy all of that, and a lot of that came through with Willem Dafoe's character, and Willem Dafoe featured heavily in the trailer, but then it took him quite a while to get on screen the movie. I don't think he showed up until maybe the last 45 minutes or so. It was all very interesting, and Willem Dafoe had one really interesting line in this that I think a lot of people won't pick up on, but it tells me that Robert Eggers is really keyed in on some really esoteric stuff. Father Robert Nixon, he's a Catholic priest and a monk. He lives and works at an abbey here in Australia, in rural Western Australia. They have this vast library of old books and things of that nature, and he's been working on translating them into English, and he found this old manual for exorcisms. I don't remember exactly the year, but in the exorcism manual, the exorcist would be calling not only on Jesus, on God, on angels, but the exorcist would be invoking demons and invoking Satan, not praying to them, but sort of bargaining with or talking to Satan and being like, Satan, you're in charge. These devils, these demons are, like, they're below you. You take them out. By God's name, I command you. Which modern exorcists don't work that way. Any sorts of appeal to the devil itself has been gone. When the Vatican formally changed the exorcism exorcism process in 1999. But obviously before that there were little minor changes here and there as well, and different rites and different dioceses of course would have different guidelines as well. It wasn't as formalized. But there's a line Willem Dafoe makes where he says, may all the angels and demons help us, or something like that. He invoked both angels and demons for assistance, which is something that, like I said, older exorcists would do, and that was sort of a part of an older faith that's been lost in the modern time, and especially in this part of Europe at that time. We can't be 100% sure, but we're pretty sure that sort of thing would have been going on. And that just tells me Robert Eggers is kind of like really keyed in on some of these things that are really not that common. And you see it a lot, like when Thomas leaves and he goes to the that first village, which, by the way, if I were to ever go to that village and I walk in and people are dancing all around me and playing music while staring right at me, I think I would promptly leave. I think I'd rather sleep outside than in that situation. But yeah, these people, when they're doing this ritual, they give a that was kind of confusing to me, because they said the vampires here, they had the girl naked on the horse, but then the vampire was in the coffin and being stabbed by the stakes. I wasn't really sure if they were giving her away as tribute to Count Orlok, I guess a sacrifice to keep them safe for some determinate period of time, or what that was. But just those sorts of rituals, those sorts of especially folk tradition things were really well done in this, and they did a really good sense of dread and like almost supernatural domination over people. There were a couple parts where I felt like it didn't work. Now, Orlok is very scary, very all of that, but the first part, when Thomas is going to have him sign the deed, and he accidentally cuts his finger, right? And Orlok, of course, gets very wide-eyed, and he wants to drink the blood, and he asks Thomas stand in front of the fireplace. There's this moment where, like, Thomas just starts panicking and collapses. He wakes up the next morning, and there's a couple times where Ellen does similar things. She has her convulsions, and there's one towards the end of the film where, like, her eyes roll back in her head and she's like sticking her tongue out, really contorting her face. That stuff sort of didn't work for me as much. That Lily Rose Depp in most of the film was really good, but those scenes of her like being in that sort of weird contorted state, it didn't really hit for me, and it kind of felt out of place in a Robert Eggers film. When he does his madness, his supernatural, whatever possession, in all of his previous films, it's been very subtle. It's slight changes in personality, things like that, but I don't know, it just felt very over the top. It kind of felt too like The Conjuring, so to speak. Like, it was just, I didn't really care for that sort of stuff in the movie, and that did detract from the overall score of the film. That I'll give it at the end here. I loved the allegory. It wasn't really an allegory, I guess it was fairly explicit, but you know, Orlok as the plague. Now specifically in this case it's the bubonic plague, and I think you could very easily draw parallels to what we just went through, what I can't say on YouTube. And course, Ellen's role as like the sacrificing of innocence in order to overcome, which of course is all very apt, very relevant to what we went through as well. Sacrificing your innocence, sacrificing your childhood, giving that up in order to overcome the thing you're trying to overcome. And the way it drives people to act. So Orlok, he's more of a force than anything else. I think Orlok even says it himself at one point in the film. He's like, I am an appetite. And that always comes through, I think, with the performance with him as well. In a sense, he's sort of just enabling everyone's worst qualities that they already possessed. There was one thing with this movie that I really loved. Of course, the aspect ratio. Eggers always using unique aspect ratios. Here we're going with a more square letterboxed aspect ratio for this film. But there's one thing that I'm trying to figure out, and I think I'm gonna have to wait until the home release so I can really sit down and go scene by scene. But there'd be some scenes where you're in black and white, and some scenes where you're in color, and then some scenes where it's kind of like in between. Now, personally, I felt that the presence of black and white indicated that was when Orlok's presence was there. He didn't have to be there physically, but his presence, his influence, all of that was there when it was black and white. But then there's a couple segments, and I can't remember off the top of my head what they are, or I feel like that doesn't really line up. So again, I'm gonna have to rewatch it, but I feel like there has to be a meaning behind the black and white segments that makes them different from the color segments. A couple other little random thoughts. Aaron Taylor Johnson, I think he did fantastic in this movie. He played that sort of dignified social elite very well, and I want to wear all of the outfits he wore in this film. Also, I love that there's that scene later in the film where Orlok commands him not to wake, and this is before he kills his two children. And he's laying in bed asleep, and he just has a gun in his hand. Now, given the time period, I'm pretty sure that would be a flintlock pistol or something of the sort. That feels extremely, even if it wasn't a flintlock pistol, it feels extremely dangerous. Just sleeping with the gun in his hand, like, bro is just out cold, but he's got the blicky on him in case like the ops roll up. It's just that scene of Orlok's hand as well, expanding out over the city after he arrives. That was fantastic. I believe that comes from the original Nosferatu. I haven't watched it in forever. I believe there's also a similar scene in Dracula with Gary Oldman. Also his like eyes looking out over the mountains, whatever. The death of Count Orlok is pretty wild. The way they do it and the way it looks is insane. I also really like Count Orlok. They mix it up, not drinking from the neck, drinking from the chest, directly from the heart. And you have those very visceral gulping sounds. Like, dude is just like gulping liters of blood. Very nice touch. But like, as much as I love Robert Eggers' style, he did have a lot of style in this. He had some really good performances. Ralph Ineson was in this, of course. He's a mainstay in Eggers' films. Defoe did amazing. I thought Nicholas Hoult was alright. Bill Skarsgård, of course, the light of this movie is the best performance. Lily Rose Depp, I thought she did pretty good. Aaron Taylor Johnson. It's funny, but Aaron Taylor Johnson is he's going to be in both one of, if not the worst rated films of this year. Probably one of the highest rated films of this year as well. Craven the Hunter and Nosferatu. But this felt like a weirdly safe retelling of the story we already know. It kind of just felt like Robert Eggers watched Dracula, watched Nosferatu, watched all these, and he's like, I just want to make that movie, and that is kind of my only issue with it. It feels weirdly safe. It's just sort of a retelling of a story we already know. And I don't think it's the best telling of the Dracula story. I still think that the Keanu Reeves, Gary Oldman Dracula movie, for as bad as Keanu's accent is and some of the shortcomings of that movie, I think that's still the best film version of this story. And although I liked this one, it just it wasn't different enough. It was basically just like, you know, that meme of like, what if Wes Anderson directed something? This was literally just like, what if Robert Eggers directed Dracula or Nosferatu? And he kinda, as much as I liked it, it felt like he played it safe a little bit. I still would absolutely recommend the movie, and I'm gonna give it a high score, but I feel like it could have been better. For as good as it is, I think it could have been better. I'm gonna go 4.5 out of 5, 9 out of 10. That feels about where this movie's at for me. But anyway, guys, if you saw Nosferatu, let me know what you thought. If you agree or disagree with anything I've been saying here. But if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Almost every single